feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 go. Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go.
Hello, WWE wrestling fans. Welcome to an all-new episode of WWE and Pro Wrestling Dirtiest Secrets. I'm your host, WWE fanboy, Alex Cardinale. Today's topic, we are going back to my childhood, and we're going back to the 90s and early 2000s to talk about the Monday Night Wars. It was WWF Monday Night Raw taking on WCW Monday Night Nitro. So it was Monday Night Raw from WWF versus WCW Nitro on Monday evenings. Now, I often think to myself that I was a very fortunate wrestling fan growing up because the Monday Night Wars provided wrestling fans a lot of great moments and a lot of great action. From the Monday Night Wars, we got NWO consisting of Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash. We got Sting. We also got Goldberg and Scott Steiner from WCW. But on the WWF side, we had the rise of Mankind, Bang Bang. We had the rise of The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Undertaker, DX, Shawn Michaels, and Triple H. So the Monday Night Wars was pivotal in the success of American pro wrestling and then eventually the WWE. In early 2001, Vince McMahon destroyed and bought out his competition by purchasing WCW. What led to the demise of WCW? What led to WWE becoming victorious? We're going to talk about that today. So today on Pro Wrestling Dirtiest Secrets, we're going to talk about the Monday Night Wars, and then we'll talk about the demise of WCW. We'll talk about what the Monday Night Wars were and what they were about. We'll talk about the history of the Monday Night Wars. We'll talk about the demise of WCW. And then we'll conclude the show with the aftermath of the Monday Night Wars. So before I begin today's show, I'd like to let all my live viewers know and all my viewers know that you can share your thoughts on this topic. What were your thoughts on the Monday Night War? What was your favorite brand? Did you prefer Monday Night Raw or did you prefer Monday Nitro? Let me know in the comments. Now, me personally, for as long as I can remember, I watched Nitro a lot. And one of the reasons I watched Nitro was because of Sting. Sting was one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. And Sting is still wrestling today, which is incredible for his body strength, considering his age. That is pretty cool. But I also watched WWE Monday Night Raw, especially when Raw was War. That was a very good show as well. And on Raw, I got to see Mankind become the WWF champion, Undertaker, Stone Cold, and The Rock. So I watched both of them, but I tended to favorite more Raw because Nitro kind of did the same storylines for a long, long time, and I got very bored with the same storylines. So we've got a couple of comments. Cyclo says, "Hi, Alex. Hey, how are you? Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you being on the show." And Bob says, "Do you think wrestling is fake?" No, it is not. Wrestling is absolutely 100% not fake. It is, however, choreographed, but that does not mean that it's fake because wrestlers still get gruesome injuries. One example I could give you, one recent example, would be a wrestler by the name of Cody Rhodes, who suffered a torn pec, but yet he still wrestled. And also Edge, who broke his neck in real life. He's able to come back after many years off, but the wrestlers, they do suffer real life injuries, and it's very painful too. The slaps and everything you see happen on TV are actually real. They don't have like stunt doubles or anything taking the action. It's real slaps, real punches, real kicks. It's dialed down just a little bit, but it is real and people still get injured. So I hope that answers your question. It is absolutely not fake like some of the other stuff out there. It is just choreographed and it is still sports. There's a reason why professional wrestling is called sports entertainment because it is athleticism and you have to be in shape to wrestle and you have to be an athlete to be able to perform at the level that they do, which is why a lot of these younger superstars are being released. It's because they cannot perform safely in a ring. And Vince McMahon sees that and he's like, you know what? He's not going to be where I want him to be. So I'm going to go ahead and release him. But thank you guys for those great questions. So let's get to our first topic for today's show, and that is what were the Monday Night Wars? So let's break it down. The Monday Night Wars was an era of mainstream televised American professional wrestling in which the World Wrestling Federation, which is now WWE, Monday Night Raw, and World Championship Wrestling's WCW Monday Nitro were broadcast opposite each other in a battle for Nelson ratings each week. The ratings war lasted from September 4th, 1995, all the way through March 26, 2001. The rating war was part of a larger overall struggle between the two companies, originating in personal animosity between WWF owner Vince McMahon and WCW owner Ted Turner. The rivalry between the companies steadily escalated throughout the 1990s to include the use of cutthroat tactics and the defections of employees between the two companies. For example, Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash leaving WWF to go to WCW, and Bret Hart and Lex Luger are also examples of that. Throughout the wars, the WWF and WCW would both adapt different concepts and narrative techniques innovated by Extreme Championship Wrestling, ECW. Meanwhile, both companies would establish both formal and informal partnerships with the company, with ECW performers either appearing on WWF and WCW shows while still under contract, or they left ECW altogether to work for WWF or WCW. While WCW was the dominant promotion for much of the mid 1990s, a variety of factors turned the tide in the WWF's favor at the end of the decade, including a radical rebranding of the WWF's formerly family-friendly product to highly sexualized and violent shows geared toward older teens and adults. WCW ultimately ran into financial difficulties as a result of the amount of money they had promised wrestlers during a hiring binge in the early and middle part of the decade, which had been aimed at acquiring large portions of the WWF's talent rosters. Behind the scenes, executives who have longed to see WCW removed from the Turner organization were eventually able to see it come to fruition after Turner Broadcasting's merger with Time Warner and their merger with American Online, which is AOL. With Turner no longer in control, the corporate executives of the combined AOL Time Warner would sell its assets. Despite efforts to salvage the company, it was ultimately sold to McMahon, ending the Monday Night Wars, and WWF would come out on top as the top brand. In retrospect, wrestling commentators have come to see the era of the Monday Night Wars as the golden age of wrestling, with the feud between the two companies bringing out their best quality product, both in terms of creativity and performances of the wrestlers. So that was the Monday Night Wars. And now we're going to get into the history of the Monday Night Wars to find out when it happened. Okay? So let's learn about the actual history of the Monday Night Wars right now. Alrighty. So the history of the Monday Night Wars started way back in the 1980s, 1980 to 1987, and it was cable television. Television had been a significant part of professional wrestling presentation in the United States for decades, but after the 1950s, it had been regulated to local stations as the national network ceased airing it. Many local programmers turned to professional wrestling as a means to fill out their schedules, as it was relatively inexpensive to produce but drew high ratings. This reinforced the then accepted organization of professional wrestling, which were consisted of a patchwork of territorial promotions aimed at and broadcast to local audiences without a centralized national promotion, though most territories were members of a common sanctioning body of championship titles, the National Wrestling Alliance. As cable television arose in the 1970s, local stations were often retransmitted to new markets as superstations. When Atlanta television station WTCG became a superstation in the late 1970s, Georgia Championship Wrestling, an NWA member, which aired on the station, reached a national audience. The company's television show, hosted by Gordon Soley, was recorded in one of the studios at 1050 Techwood Drive in downtown Atlanta. Shows were taped before a small live in-studio audience, as were most professional wrestling television shows of that era. So that's a little background of professional wrestling when it first got on cable television. Now let's learn about the WWF's transition into cable. In 1983, the WWF started its own cable show called WWF All-American Wrestling, airing Sunday mornings on the USA Network. Later that year, the WWF debuted a second cable show, also on the USA Network, called Tuesday Night Titans, a talk show spoof hosted by Vince McMahon, the WWF owner, and Lord Alfred Hayes. So that's when WWF started on cable television. While still running steadily, Barnett and the Briscoes sold their entire stock in GCW, including the television deal, to Vince McMahon, and on July 14th, 1984, otherwise known as Black Saturday, the WWF took over the GCW show. With this move, Mr. McMahon controlled all nationally televised wrestling in the United States. However, the WWF show on TBS was a ratings disaster, as GCF fans, disliking the cartoonish characters and storylines of the WWF, simply stopped watching. 2 weeks after Black Saturday, TBS debuted the show of a successor promotion to GCW, created by holdout shareholders, Championship Wrestling from Georgia, albeit on early Saturday mornings. So, moreover, despite original promising to produce original programming for the TBS time slot in Atlanta, McMahon chose instead to provide only a clip show for TBS, featuring highlights from other WWF programs, as well as matches from house shows at Madison Square Garden, Boston Garden, and other major arenas. This format would eventually be the cornerstone of the WWF primetime wrestling. In May 1985, McMahon sold the TBS time slot to another Southern-based and NWA-affiliated wrestling company, Jimmy Crockett Promotions, under heavy pressure from station owner Ted Turner, who was unhappy with the declining ratings. This set up the rivalry between McMahon and Turner and the Monday Night Wars that would continue for 16 years. So that is how the Monday Night Wars actually started. It was from what I just mentioned. So now we're going to fast forward to 1987 to 1993. Scheduling conflicts and Monday Night Raw. During a span of 5 months between November 1987 and March 1988, a bitter event scheduling war broke out between Vince McMahon and Jim Crockett Jr. Throughout the 1980s, Crockett had steadily bought out other NWA affiliated programs in an attempt to make his organization a national one, similar to the WWF. As a result, the term NWA became virtually synonymous with Jim Crockett Promotions. On Thanksgiving night 1987, Vince McMahon's WWF aired Survivor Series on pay-per-view against the NWA Starrcade, which Crockett marketed as the NWA's answer to WrestleMania. However, many cable companies can only offer one live pay-per-view event at a time. The WWF then threatened that any cable company that chose not to carry Survivor Series would not carry any future WWF pay-per-view events 60 days before and 21 days after the show. Therefore, the WWF pay-per-view was cleared 10-1 over Starrcade, as only 3 cable companies opted to remain loyal to their contract with Crockett. After this incident, the pay-per-view industry warned Vince McMahon not to schedule pay-per-view events simultaneously with the NWA again. However, he was still not willing to fully cooperate with Crockett. On January 24th, 1988, another scheduling conflict took place between the WWF and NWA. The NWA presented the Bunkhouse Stampede on pay-per-view, while WWF aired the Royal Rumble for free on the USA Network. Later that year, with WWF's WrestleMania around the corner, Crockett decided to use McMahon's own tactics against him, developing his own pay-per-view caliber event and airing it for free on TBS opposite WrestleMania. The result was the Clash of the Champions, the inaugural event. On March 27, 1988, the same night as WrestleMania, the first Clash of the Champions aired. The show made Sting a star after he wrestled NWA World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair to a 45-minute draw. So we're going to fast forward a bit to 1993. As 1993 began, primetime wrestling was struggling in the ratings and was canceled by the USA Network. And here is where Monday Night Raw makes its debut. The show that succeeded it, Monday Night Raw, changed how wrestling on cable television would be presented. The WWF decided that it should use its cable time as a showcase for original matches and storylines that would serve as the major build-up to the quarterly pay-per-view broadcast. The original Raw broke new ground in televised professional wrestling. Traditionally, wrestling shows were taped on sound stages with small audiences or at large arena shows. The Raw formula was very different than that of primetime wrestling. Instead of tape matches with studio voiceovers and tape chat, Raw was a show shot to a live audience with storylines unfolding as they happened. The first episode featured Sean Mooney reporting from the streets of New York City and interviews by Bobby Heenan, Yokozuna defeating Koko Beware, the Steiner brothers defeating the Executioners, WWF Intercontinental Champion Shawn Michaels defeating Max Moon, and The Undertaker defeating Damien Demento. The show also featured an interview with Razor Ramon. Raw originated from the Grand Ballroom at the Manhattan Center, a New York City theater, and aired live each week. The combination of an intimate venue and live action proved highly successful. However, the weekly live schedule became a financial drain on the WWF, and the company began taping shows. Sometimes up to a month's worth of shows were taped at a time. 1993 to 1994, Eric Bischoff is put in charge of WCW. In the same year as the premiere of Monday Night Raw, WCW promoted former commentator and American Wrestling Association AWA announcer and sales associate Eric Bischoff to the position of executive vice president. During Bischoff's first year at the top of WCW, bookers Ole Anderson and Dusty Rhodes concocted cartoonish, unbelievable, and poorly built up storylines that were poorly received by fans, such as Lost in Cleveland, a storyline in which Cactus Jack developed amnesia and disappeared in Cleveland, Ohio. The White Castle of Fear, a match between Sting and Vader themed around B movies meant to promote Super Brawl, and tongue-in-check short beach party movies used as promotional videos for Beach Blast. In February 1993, longtime NWA stalwart Ric Flair returned to WCW after an 18-month WWF tenure, but since Flair was constrained by a no compete clause from his WWF contract, WCW gave him a talk show segment on his television shows called The Flair for the Gold. At Slamboree 1993, WCW reunited the Four Horsemen with Flair, Arn Anderson, and Paul Roma. Ole Anderson was part of the group as an advisor, but made only one appearance on A Flair for the Gold. A Flair for the Gold would eventually play host to one of the most infamous incidents of 1990s wrestling, a masked man known as the Shockmaster. The Shockmaster was supposed to crash through a fake wall and intimidate the heels. However, he tripped through the wall, fell on live television, and briefly knocked off his helmet. One of the many things that led to the failure of the WCW and the closing of WCW. The incident would be talked about for years to come, and along with WWF's gobbledygooker, Shockmaster became wrestling parlance for an exceptionally poorly executed idea. That same year, WCW began taping matches months in advance for syndicated programming like WCW Worldwide at the Disney MGM studios, which would become known as the Disney tapings. The Disney tapings would ultimately prove disastrous to the company's reputation, largely due to WCW's underestimation of growing internet culture, because the events were recorded weeks and sometimes months in advance. Fans in attendance had time to disseminate the results, not only to wrestling magazines, but also across the internet. By the end of the year, WCW decided to once again base the promotion around Ric Flair. The decision was largely made out of necessity. The company had intended to place heavy emphasis on Sid Vicious, but he was involved in a legitimate altercation with fellow wrestler Arn Anderson while on tour in England. Moving forward, in 1994, Bischoff took a more aggressive stance in his capacity as vice president. He declared open war on the WWF and aggressively recruited high-profile former WWF wrestlers such as Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage using Ted Turner's funds. Because of their high profiles, Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage were able to demand and get several concessions not usually allowed to wrestlers at the time. Notably, the men negotiated total creative control over their characters, such egomaniacs, in addition to multi-year, multi-million-dollar contracts at a time when many top wrestlers were only receiving around $1 million a year. Bischoff's concessions to Hogan and Savage would set a precedent for WCW's hiring process that would prove problematic in later years, as Bischoff began to aggressively pursue rival talent for jobs with WCW's. Performers aware of the deals Hogan and Savage had been given began to demand similar contracts, ultimately causing wrestlers' salaries to soar out of control. Concurrent with Hogan's arrival in WCW, he and Bischoff formed a close real-life friendship that would afford Hogan a degree of influence over the day-to-day operations of the company. WCW's first major pay-per-view event since Hogan's hiring, Bash at the Beach, saw Hulk Hogan defeat Ric Flair for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. The match was a reworking of a long teased but never realized feud between the men while they were still working for the WWF. An intended main event match between them at WrestleMania was changed to Hogan versus Sid and Flair versus Savage, and the rivalry was never realized. Bischoff's attempt to deliver a dream match never produced by the WWF paid off, and the pay-per-view drew a disproportionately high buy rate by the company standard. In 1994, ECW goes extreme, and ECW made its presence felt in 1994. And ECW had competitors appear on both WCW and WWF. So that's a little bit of history on the Monday Night Wars. Now we're going to get into the actual history. 1995 to 1996 was the debut of Monday Nitro. Monday Nitro premiered on September 4th, 1995 as an hour-long weekly show, and Bischoff was instrumental in the launching of the show. During their mid-1995 meeting, Turner asked Bischoff how WCW could compete with the WWF. Bischoff, not expecting Turner to comply, said that the only way would be a prime time slot on a weekday night, possibly up against the WWF's flagship show, Monday Night Raw. Surprisingly for Bischoff, Turner granted him one live hour on TNT every Monday night, which specifically overlapped with Raw. This format expanded to 2 live hours in May 1996 and later 3 hours. The initial broadcast of Nitro also featured the return of Lex Luger to WCW. Luger had worked for the company from 1987 to 1992, when it was still affiliated with the NWA, before joining the WWF the following year. Raw and Nitro traded wins in the Monday Night Wars early on, but WWE has conceded that by December 1995, WCW had the advantage over the WWF in the storied Monday Night Wars. Nitro began airing a weekly segment entitled Where the Big Boys Play, composed of stock footage of matches featuring current WWF wrestlers who had started their careers as jobbers in WCW, all of which ended in the WWF wrestler suffering a humiliating loss. Bischoff also began to give away the results of Monday Night Raw matches on Nitro, as Raw was usually taped a week prior to airing. These moves prompted retaliatory tactics by the WWF. In January 1996, Raw began airing skits before and after commercial breaks entitled Billionaire Ted's Wrestling War Room, depicting parodies of Ted Turner, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, and Gene Okerlund. While the material involving Hogan and Savage usually poked fun at their old ages, the skits aimed at Turner were decidedly more inflammatory in nature and contained material that could have been considered slanderous. WrestleMania also began a brief turning point for the WWE, after which Raw would overtake Nitro for 2 consecutive months. That year's WrestleMania saw the return of a 1980s fan favorite, Roddy Rowdy Piper, who made a face turn to fight Goldberg. Another 1980s fan favorite returning that evening was the Ultimate Warrior, who would go on to enjoy a brief revival in popularity. The main event, a heavily promoted Iron Man match between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, lasted for more than an hour. 1996 was also the curtain call incident. In April of 1996, two of the WWF's top performers, Kevin Nash, known as Diesel, and Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, signed contracts with WCW. Prior to their departure with the WWF, the men had been part of the Clique, a tight-knit affiliation of wrestlers in the WWF whose backstage influence allowed them to wield an enormous amount of power over the direction of the company. The group consisted of Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, Triple H, Scott Hall, and Sean Waltman. And they did a hug in the middle of Madison Square Garden, and Triple H got punished for that, and that was the curtain call incident. 1996 to 1997, WCW brought in a new group known as the New World Order, and that lasted for a while. The New World Order made their debut at Bash at the Beach when Hulk Hogan appeared and turned heel. And that would lead to WCW gaining control over the WWF because the NWO was a new concept at the time, and wrestling fans were heavily into it. Throughout the 1996 and 1997 year, WWF had struggles. Raw and WWF in general in 1996 and 97 was considered to be at a creative nadir before Nitro started. On November 4th, 1996 episode of Raw, the WWF aired a storyline involving Stone Cold and Brian Pillman, two former friends who were feuding with each other. In a series of vignettes broadcast from Pillman's real-life home in Newport, Kentucky, Pillman supposedly debilitated following an attack by Austin. He vowed to protect himself and his wife with the help of a group of friends should Austin appear. The angle polarized fans and shocked the USA Network, which was not accustomed to airing a program with profanity and level of violence presented in the vignettes. Although the WWF and Pillman himself were forced to issue apologies to avoid Raw being canceled for breach of contract, the ensuing discussion of the incident in the fan community generated the most attention that WWF had received since the beginning of Monday Night Wars. This prompted the WWF creative team to begin looking into the idea of more adult-oriented storylines and characters and mimicking WCW's metafiction elements. So on February 3rd, 1997, Monday Night Raw went to 2 hours instead of 1. And in an attempt to break the momentum of Nitro, WWF entered into a cross-promotional agreement with ECW. Raw commentator Jerry Lawler insulted and challenged ECW on Raw's February 17th episode, and in the weeks to come, several ECW wrestlers appeared on Raw in a storyline arc similar to the NWO storyline playing out in WCW, with the WWF persuading the renegade ECW. On March 10th, 1997, Raw was officially renamed Raw is War in reference to the ongoing rating battle. And we all know in November of 1997, there was the Montreal Screwjob. Bret Hart did not want to relinquish the WWF Championship, so Vince McMahon and Shawn Michaels came together to screw Bret Hart out of the championship, and Bret Hart would leave WWF to go to WCW, where ultimately Bret Hart had a lackluster run at WCW. His career would be ended by a stiff kick by Goldberg, and his in-ring career was basically over at that point. He really didn't have much of an in-ring career after that. Also in 1997, WWF had their alternate to the NWO, D-Generation X, formed, a team that was led by Triple H and Shawn Michaels. Also in 1997, WCW Starrcade pay-per-view in Washington, D.C. drew WCW's highest buy rate to that date, including the highly anticipated main event of Hollywood Hogan versus Sting, a match that fans had been waiting to see since Sting first appeared as the leader of an anti-NWO faction a year before. 1997 to 1999 was the Attitude Era for the WWF, now known as the WWE. From 97 to 99, we saw the rise of Stone Cold Steve Austin. We saw the creation of the Mr. McMahon television character. We saw the rise of DX, Shawn Michaels and Triple H, The Undertaker, Mick Foley, Mankind, and so many other legends that the WWE had. And it was because of the Attitude Era, it turned things in favor for WWF. In late 1998 and 1999, WCW began to struggle. Hoping to counter the McMahon-Austin feud, WCW divided the NWO into the Hollywood Hogan-led heel NWO Hollywood faction and the Kevin Nash-led face NWO Wolfpack faction. Although the Wolfpack proved popular with fans, the overall NWO storyline began to grow stale. As with the culmination of the Sting-Hogan match, fans grew tired of the lack of any kind of resolution, as many matches between the groups simply ended in disqualification when other members jumped into the ring to interfere, leading to all-out brawls. Ted Turner decided to expand the brand by introducing a second weekly program, WCW Thunder, on TBS. The introduction of Thunder troubled Eric Bischoff, who warned Turner that a second weekly program could potentially result in fan burnout, as viewing both programs would require 5 hours of viewing time a week. WCW attempted to regain rating supremacy by signing Bill Goldberg as an invincible monster with a record-breaking streak of 173 consecutive wins. Goldberg proved to be very popular with the fans and enjoyed some crossover success in mainstream popular culture. On July 6, 1998, airing from the Georgia Dome in Atlanta, Georgia, Nitro defeated Raw is War in the ratings when Goldberg pinned Hogan to win the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. The match drew a 6.91 rating for the quarter hour, the highest rating recorded in the rating war up to that time, and over 5 million viewers. However, the decision to stage the match on live cable television was questioned backstage at WCW. Several employees felt that match should have been the highlight of a pay-per-view, where it could have generated more revenue. On August 10th, 1998, WCW regained the lead for 6 weeks. During this time, WCW brought in the Ultimate Warrior, now known as the Warrior, and then later reformed the Four Horsemen for Ric Flair's television return. WCW's final victory in the Monday Night Wars came on October 26th, following the previous night's Halloween Havoc pay-per-view. The episode included a repeat airing of the Halloween Havoc WCW World Heavyweight Championship match between Diamond Dallas Page and Goldberg, after the original airing exceeded the scheduled 3-hour running time and subscribers lost the feed at 11 p.m. Eastern. In the fall of 1998, The Rock's popularity led to a main event lead babyface push, putting him against Mr. McMahon in the build-up to Survivor Series, leading to one of the biggest swerves in WWF history, with The Rock turning heel and aligning with Mr. McMahon to form the corporation upon winning the WWF Championship against Mankind. Prior to this, the WWF's Austin McMahon and WCW's Goldberg NWO storylines would have each company trade victories. The Rock's leap into megastar status and subsequent feud with Mankind would give the WWF the lead, nearly doubling WWF ratings and pay-per-view buys entering 1999. In 1999 and 2000, WCW started to decline. As 1999 began, both shows were consistently getting 5.0 or higher Nelson ratings, and over 10 million people tuned in to watch Raw is War and Nitro every week. Wrestling gained newfound popularity as wrestlers made the mainstream media, appearing on magazine covers like Entertainment Weekly and TV Guide, and appearing in commercials. By November 1998, however, the momentum would be in WWF's favor for the remainder of the war. On January 4th, 1999, Nitro broadcast live once again from the Georgia Dome. In the second of 3 hours, Eric Bischoff made a costly mistake. Eric Bischoff had learned the results of the taped Raw is War that was set to air that night, and he ordered commentator Tony Schiavone to make the following statement: "Fans, if you're even thinking about changing the channel to our competition, do not. We understand that Mick Foley, who wrestled here at one time as Cactus Jack, is going to win their world title. Ha! That's going to put some butts in seats, eh?" Although the WWF had acknowledged the title change on their website 6 days previously, ratings indicated that immediately after Schiavone's comments, 600,000 people switched channels from Nitro on TNT to Raw is War on USA Network to see Mankind win the WWF Championship with the help of Stone Cold Steve Austin. After Mankind won the title, many fans then switched back to Nitro, which still had 5 minutes of airtime left, suggesting that WCW had a show that the fans wanted to see and might have emerged the victor that night had they not given away the Raw is War results. The final ratings for the night were 5.7 for Raw is War and 5.0 for Nitro. During the year following the incident, many WWF fans brought signs to shows saying, "Mick Foley put my butt in this seat." Raw is War was dominating Nitro to the point where WCW was making quick fixes to stem the tide, including hiring rapper Master P, bringing in Megadeth, Chad Brock, and Kiss for concerts, and conducting a contest to find a new member of Nitro Girls, all which flopped in the ratings. On September 10th, 1999, Bischoff was removed from power. On October 5th, 1999, Vince Russo and Ed Ferreira, the head writers of WWF television programs, signed with WCW and were immediately replaced in the WWF by Chris Kresge. So Vince Russo is to blame for the failure and the demise of WCW. So we're going to fast forward all the way to the end of the war, where WCW finally got beat, and WCW lost the Monday Night War when Vince McMahon purchased WCW in March of 2021. WWF gained all of WCW's material. WWF would use WCW in their WrestleMania feud between Shane McMahon and Vince McMahon, and they would even create pay-per-views celebrating the victory WWF had. In the pay-per-view, WWF mainly won. So in the end, while WCW had some success rating-wise, they ultimately failed and they are killed. Because Vince McMahon was smart, he waited it out, and once he saw the opportunity to buy his competition, he did. And in 2002, Vince McMahon got rid of the Raw is War League logo, and his name was retired in September 2001 following the September 11 attacks and sensitivity over the word war. And because the Monday Night Wars were over, Monday Night Raw was the superior brand. And Monday Night Raw has been around ever since. And that is the history of Monday Night Wars. The demise of WCW can be summed up in many reasons, but one of them being signing too many wrestlers to too big of contracts. Vince Russo's stupid storyline ideas, giving away WWF results on live television, catapulting people to go watch WWF, and stupid storylines. That is what led to the demise of WCW, and then eventually Vince McMahon would buy out WCW. All right, let's learn about the aftermath of the Monday Night Wars. As a result of the Monday Night Wars, professional wrestling became a prime time tradition on Monday nights in America. It also lessened the prevalence of squash matches, where star wrestlers would defeat jobbers on television. The Monday Night Wars resulted in the creation of millions of new wrestling viewers. The late 90s are commonly referred to as professional wrestling's most recent boom period. Stars such as Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Goldberg, and Sting became household names, and some attempted to parlay their newfound fame into other mediums and found success in them, much like Hulk Hogan of the 1980s and early 1990s. Notable examples being Mick Foley, who became a New York Times best-selling author with the first volume of his autobiography, Have a Nice Day, and of course, The Rock. WCW's closure left a gap in the market, which several companies have attempted to fill but failed. TNA and Ring of Honor emerged in early 2002 and have enjoyed moderate to little success since that time. On January 4th, 2010, TNA moved Impact to Monday nights in a direct competition with Raw. In a move referred to by some as the new Monday Night Wars, TNA began airing Impact on Monday each week beginning on March 8th, 2010. After declining ratings, the show returned to its Thursday time slot in May 2010. So that is the aftermath of the Monday Night Wars. WCW superstars Goldberg, Scott Steiner, Booker T, Kevin Nash, and others returned or debuted with the WWE. Goldberg has had a very successful career with the WWE. Booker T has had a great career, but not so much for Scott Steiner or Sting, who had mediocre careers with the WWE, especially with Triple H burying Scott Steiner, Goldberg, Sting, and Booker T. All right, that is this week's edition of WWE and Pro Wrestling's Dirtiest Secrets. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I know it was a very long show, but it had a lot of information that I had to give out. So, my next episode of WWE's Dirtiest Secrets will be on perhaps the greatest heel of my generation, and the guy whose career had to be cut short because he was doing such a great job as a heel, Muhammad Hassan. So the next episode of Pro Wrestling's Dirtiest Secret will be Muhammad Hassan. And don't forget, we are quickly approaching Money in the Bank. And next week, I'll start doing some Money in the Bank wrestling shows. So don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, the legendary Alex Cardinale. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you on the next episode of Pro Wrestling 101. Don't miss Monday Night Raw live this Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody, and be sure to tune into my 700th video this Sunday. Good night, everybody. Hey everyone, legendary Alex Cardinale here. And guess what? Together, you, my audience, and I are celebrating history once more this year. Can you guys believe that on June 12th, I will be celebrating my 700th video? Yes, that's right. June 12th, I will be hosting my 700th video. I remember my 500th and my 600th video like it was yesterday. You, the audience, make me put out these awesome videos and I lose count. I prefer quality over quantity, but in this case, quantity is quality. I'm enjoying hosting these videos for you. So I, legendary Alex Cardinale, am extremely proud to invite you to be a part of the 700th video celebration. It is going down live Sunday, June 12th, 2022 at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, right here on my YouTube channel, the legendary Alex Cardinale. I cannot wait to host the 700th video. It is going to be a blast. Chef Alex Cardinale is going to be in the house, and he's going to be cooking and baking. Watch Chef Alex make a delicious homemade French onion soup. And for dessert, Chef Alex will teach you how to make creme brulee, a really delicious pudding-like dessert. So Chef Alex goes French for the 700th video, as he'll show you how to make a delicious French onion soup and creme brulee. That's going to be really delicious. You guys all know that I work at the Palm Beach Zoo. And something special that I'm doing to celebrate 700 videos. I am going to enter the lorikeet loft at Palm Beach Zoo and hand feed lorikeets on video for my 700th video. That is going to be fantastic and definitely legendary. Now, of course, you can't have a party without aquariums and tropical fish. And you can't talk about aquariums and tropical fish without the man himself, Aqua Alex. Aqua Alex will give you a tour of one of his favorite local fish stores. Plus, will Aqua Alex get new fish? And there may also be aquarium topics talked about by Aqua Alex Cardinale. Also, relive the best moments on this YouTube channel. I will play 7 of my best moments from my YouTube channel over the last 699 videos. There will also be other surprises. Will there be any legendary appearances? We shall find out. And who will be special guests if there are any special guests? Will there be a chef? Will there be a fish keeping guest? We will have to find out. So mark your calendars, ladies and gentlemen, and all my loyal subscribers. The legendary Alex Cardinale YouTube channel celebrates 700 videos live Sunday, June 12th, 2022 at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. Come celebrate history, have some fun, and watch a fun celebration Sunday, June 12th, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. Thank you, everybody, for making this a possibility, and I look forward to my next party. I'll see you on the 700th video celebration party, June 12th, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, right here on my YouTube channel.